Alright, so our next graph is absolute values. So if you remember absolute values in numbers, it just pretty much makes whatever positive. So absolute value of -3, we know is just 3. So absolute value of -2, you know is 2. So you can see how the numbers, all the negative numbers just become positive. So the most basic one is y equals absolute value of x. And pretty much you see from the table values, it's pretty much just going to go like a v. So one thing I want you to keep in mind is that absolute values make things positive. So if this was a graph, think of it as a graph y equals x. It pretty much made all the negatives positive. So I'll do a random one here. So just say if we had the basic graph of this, if that's your y equals fx, the absolute value of this graph would look something like this. So notice how all the negative parts just moved up to become positive. So if you're thinking about how absolute values make numbers positive, that's pretty much the same thing in the graph. So all the negative bits move up to the positive. Alright, so now let's go back to our main graphs. So yeah, so by now you should have an idea of what the negative version would look like. It's pretty much just the v, but flipped. So yeah, so remember domain and range for these both are all real x because there's no limitation on x, but the range is pretty much where the sharp corner is. So here the range is y is greater than 0, here to y is less than 0. Alright, so let's move down to these graphs. So y equals absolute value of x minus 2. So if you think about it, I'm pretty sure you guys should know what this looks like. So remember the -2 just moves the whole graph down. So we have our basic graph. But then because it's normally at 0, it's going to move down 2 units. So if we wanted to find the x-intercept, so let y equals 0, so you get absolute value of x equals 2. And remember that's a positive and negative case, so we get 2 and -2. So the next one, think about it how it's similar to our questions in brackets. So normally when it's in brackets it moves things left or right, and in this case it's just going to move it 2 spaces to the right. And that there cuts at 2. And then this next graph, so like I usually do, I put a combination of the two methods of moving. So yeah, let's break this down. So y equals absolute value of, so negative, absolute value of 2x plus 1, and then plus 3 on the side. So yeah, so let's just focus on the absolute value bit without the negative. So 2x plus 1, we know that's going to move it to the left by a half, because you get 2x plus 1 equals 0, and then we solve for it, so we get it moves to the left by a half. We know that negative is going to make the v go downwards, and then plus 3, that just means the whole graph moves up 3. So that means our corner should be there. So let's find the intercepts. So y-intercept when x equals 0. So y equals absolute value of -1 plus 3. So that'll give us -1 plus 3, which is just 2. So if we wanted to find the x-intercepts, we let y equal 0. So I'm just going to move the absolute value a bit to the other side to make it positive. And remember, when we solve absolute values, you need your two cases. So you need the positive and the negative case. So there should be -3 on that side. So we just solve this quickly. So if I bring the 1 over, we get 2. So 2x equals 2, so x equals 1. And if we do the other side, we get 2x equals -4. So that means x would be -2. So yeah, so we know it cuts out 2, 1, and be -2 down here. So yeah, so if we want the domain and range of this graph, domain, we know there's no limitations on the x, so it's all real x. And the range, so y is less than or equal to, and it's wherever the sharp point is. So we know the sharp point is at 3, at -1/2 3, so it'll be less than 3. So yeah, that's absolute values. Next, we're going to move on to circles. So in general, it's x minus h all squared plus y minus k all squared equals r squared. So the center is hk. So it's whatever's in the brackets. But remember, it's sort of reversed, like how we move things left and right. The radius is just whatever's on the outside, but we've got to square root it. And the domain and range, or it's easy to see the domain and range once we sketch it. So let's draw a basic one, x squared plus y squared equals 25. Notice how there's no h or k. So that means our center is just going to be 0, 0. And the radius, we just square root 25. So radius would be 5. So yeah, so let's sketch it now. So since we know the center, always start from the center. So it's 0, 0. And there, the radius is 5. So we know it's going to go out to the right by 5, left by 5, and then up and down by 5 from the center. So pretty much that makes our circle. So, yeah, so once we have the graph, it's actually easier to see the domain and range. So what this means is domain is pretty much from wherever the center is. So that should be a y there. Yeah, so you take the center, you go out by 5, you go left by 5. So in this case, the domain is going to be from -5, so less than to equal to x, then less than or equal to 5. And we see the y values is pretty much the same thing. So we're -5, less than or equal to y less than or equal to 5. So yeah, the trick with circles is always find the center and the radius first. So the next one, x plus 2 all squared plus y squared equals 16. So the center is going to be, so since that's plus 2, it's going to go back negative 2. There's nothing with the y, so it'll be 0. And the radius would be 16. I mean 4, so square root of 16 is 4. So next we draw our axis. Then we mark the center, so negative 2, 0. So now like before, we just move right and left by 4 and up and down by 4. So we move right 4, we'll be at 2. If we move left by 4, we'll be at negative 6. So since the center is 0 for the y, it's going to go up 4 and down by negative 4. So that'll be at this point here. So yeah, connect to draw your circle. It's a pretty bad circle, but you know what it's supposed to look like. So yeah, domain. So it's much easier since we've seen the graph now. Domain is between negative 6 and 2. And the range you see is from negative 4 to 4. Alright, so I won't do the next graph. But yeah, so from looking at it, you can tell that the center is going to be so since it's minus 2, it's going to be just a normal 2, so it moves to the right 2. And since it's positive 3, it moves negative 3. And then your radius should just be 3. So you guys can graph that one and just write the domain and range on your own. So the next one, it's a bit harder. So first you got to complete the square to rearrange the equation. So like in an exam, they might not give you that hint. So yeah, so let's just rearrange it first. So x squared plus 2x. So I'm just going to leave a gap because I want to complete the square. So plus y squared minus 10y. So I'm going to leave a gap again. And equals. And then that's plus 10. If we bring it to the other side, it'll be negative 10. So now I'm going to complete the square for each of them. So when completing the square, you add b over 2 all squared to both sides. So if we're going to do it to here, in this case the b is 2. So it's 2 over 2 all squared. And then if you do it to one side, you got to do it to the other. So the next one, for this one, b is negative 10. So it's going to be negative 10 over 2 all squared. Alright, so that means this here becomes x plus 1 all squared plus y minus 5 all squared and if you calculated that, you can do it on your calculator if you want, you would get 16. So yeah, that gives us a circle with center negative 1 and 5 and the radius of 4. So yeah, knowing that, you should be able to graph it. But yeah, I'll just find the domain and range with you guys. So domain, so since it's at the x is at -1, so we're going to go left 4 and right 4. So I'll go between -5 less than or equal to x, and then less than or equal to 3. The range, so since it's at 5, we go down 4 and up 4. So the range is between 1 less than or equal to y less than or equal to 9.